In a crowded market, a simple fruit rests on a wooden table. Its skin is bright yellow. Children run past it without noticing. It looks ordinary, soft, sweet, easy to peel. But there was a time when this fruit controlled ships. It shaped borders. It changed governments. This is the story of the fruit that built empires. A fruit that traveled across oceans. A fruit that quietly moved the world. Today, we place it in lunchboxes. We blend it into smoothies. We eat it without thinking. But centuries ago, it was rare in many parts of the world. It did not grow everywhere. It belonged to warm, distant lands. The strange part was, this fruit did not shine like gold. It did not sparkle like diamonds. It bruised easily. It spoiled quickly. And yet, powerful men fought over it. The story begins in the humid forests of Southeast Asia, long before large ships crossed the Atlantic, long before global trade routes were drawn. While banana plants grew in thick green jungles, their fruits were smaller than today, filled with hard seeds. Local communities learned how to cultivate them. They selected sweeter varieties. They planted them near villages. The fruit became part of daily life. It was food. It was medicine. It was trade. Travelers carried it across islands. Farmers shared cuttings with neighbors. Slowly, the fruit spread. Across the Indian Ocean, merchants sailed. They carried spices, silk, and stories. And among these goods, the banana traveled too. In parts of Africa, farmers welcomed it. The climate was warm. The soil was rich. Banana plants grew quickly. Their large green leaves moved gently in the wind. Villages relied on them for steady food. Unlike grains, bananas did not need grinding. Unlike animals, they did not need feeding. They grew quietly in the background. Few people knew that this quiet plant would later become a global force. At that time, it was simply nourishment, simple and local. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. The banana remained in warm regions of the world. Then came a new age of exploration. European ships crossed unknown waters. They searched for spices and wealth. Explorers reached the Americas. They saw vast lands and tropical climates. Perfect conditions for new crops. Colonial powers began to experiment. Sugarcane was planted first, then coffee. But another plant would soon join them. A plant that grew fast. A plant that fed many workers. Banana shoots were transported across oceans, packed carefully on long voyages, carried into Caribbean soil. On islands in the Caribbean, plantations expanded. Rows of banana plants lined the hills, green as far as the eye could see. At first, the fruit was mostly local. It fed plantation workers. It filled nearby markets. But industrial cities in North America were growing. Factories rose. Workers needed cheap food. Railways expanded across continents. Steamships became faster. Cold storage technology improved. Suddenly, the impossible became possible. A fragile tropical fruit could travel thousands of miles and arrive fresh. Businessmen saw opportunity. They imagined ships filled with bananas, docking in busy ports. In the late 19th century, companies began to form. One of them would become famous, the United Fruit Company. Its ambitions were enormous. It did not just sell fruit. It built railroads. It owned ships. It bought vast areas of land in Central America. Thousands of acres, all for bananas. Small farms were replaced by large plantations. Workers arrived seeking jobs. Many had few other options. Bananas were harvested while still green, cut in heavy bunches, carried on shoulders to waiting carts. From the fields, they moved to rail lines. From rail lines to ports. From ports to ships. Refrigerated cargo holds kept them cool. Carefully controlled temperatures slowed ripening. Timing was everything. When the ships reached cities like New Orleans and Boston, crowds gathered near the docks. A new fruit had arrived. For many Americans, the banana was exotic, bright, different from apples and pears. Advertisements taught people how to peel it, how to slice it into cereal, how to serve it at parties. The price was surprisingly low, cheaper than many local fruits, accessible to factory workers. Demand grew quickly. Stores wanted more shipments. Companies wanted larger plantations. But supplying this demand required control. Control of land. Control of labor. Companies negotiated with governments in Central America. They requested tax breaks. They requested land rights. In return, they promised jobs. They promised development. They promised railroads and ports. Few people knew what these agreements truly meant. Whole economies began to depend on a single fruit. Bananas became the center of national income. The strange part was, the fruit itself remained soft and simple. But around it, power structures hardened. Rail lines were built not for local travel, but to move bananas to ships. Infrastructure followed the fruit. Foreign companies held enormous influence, sometimes more than local leaders, sometimes more than entire governments. And so, quietly, without weapons or crowns, a yellow fruit began shaping politics. The empire of bananas was only beginning. As banana exports increased, profits rose quickly. Ships crossed the Caribbean in steady lines. Crates of green fruit filled their holds. In Central America, plantations expanded deeper into forests. Thick jungles were cleared. New towns appeared almost overnight. Railroad tracks cut through mountains and valleys. They were not built for passengers. They were built for bananas. Workers lived in company-owned houses. They shopped at company stores. Their lives were tied to one employer. Payment often came in special company tokens. These tokens could only be used locally. Freedom became limited. But in distant cities, the fruit was celebrated. Bananas appeared in recipe books. They became a symbol of modern life. The fruit was sweet and filling. It required no cooking. It was perfect for busy urban families. Behind this convenience, however, was a complex system. Plantations needed constant labor. Harvesting never truly stopped. Bananas do not grow on trees. They grow on larger plants. Each plant produces fruit only once. After harvest, the plant must be cut down. New shoots must grow in its place. The cycle repeats again and again. To keep profits high, companies needed large areas of land. So they bought more. And sometimes they took more. Governments in countries like Honduras depended heavily on banana exports. National budgets relied on one crop. This created risk. The same was true in Guatemala. Foreign companies controlled large sections of land. Local farmers struggled to compete. People began using a new phrase, banana republic. It described nations controlled by fruit companies. The phrase sounded almost humorous, but its meaning was serious. Economic power shaped political power. Few people outside the region understood this connection. In supermarkets, bananas looked harmless. Their journey was invisible. Sometimes workers demanded better wages. They asked for safer conditions. They asked for respect. Strikes began to appear. Large groups stopped working. Plantations fell silent. Company leaders feared losses. Ships could not wait forever. Fruit would ripen too soon. Tension grew between workers and management. Negotiations were slow. Trust was fragile. In some cases, governments sided with companies. They wanted to protect foreign investment. They feared economic collapse. One of the most tragic moments happened in 1928. It took place in Cienega. Banana workers had organized a large strike. They gathered peacefully. They demanded fair contracts. They hoped for change. But what happened next surprised everyone. Government troops were sent to the area. The atmosphere turned tense. Shots were fired into the crowd. Many workers were killed. The event became known as the Banana Massacre. News of the violence spread slowly. Some reports were hidden. Others were denied. The fruit still arrived in foreign markets. Customers continued buying. Few understood the cost. Meanwhile, diseases threatened the plantations. A fungus called Panama disease began destroying crops. Entire fields turned brown. The popular Gros Michel banana was highly vulnerable. It had dominated global trade, but it could not resist the disease. Companies searched for solutions. They experimented with new varieties. They moved plantations to new land. Moving meant clearing more forest. It meant relocating workers. It meant starting again. Eventually, a new variety was chosen. It was called the Cavendish. It resisted the first wave of disease. The Cavendish became the standard banana. It is the one most people eat today. Its shape is familiar worldwide. But even this solution carried risk, because plantations grew only one type of banana. Genetic diversity was low. If a new disease appeared, entire industries could fall again. The system was fragile. Despite these dangers, expansion continued. More ships were built. More ports were improved. The United Fruit Company grew into a powerful corporation. It owned newspapers. It influenced politicians. Its leaders met with presidents. They shaped trade agreements. They defended their interests. In 1954, political tensions rose in Guatemala. Land reforms threatened company property. Change seemed possible. The company lobbied the United States government. It described the reforms as dangerous. It asked for support. Soon, international politics entered the story. Cold War fears influenced decisions. Communism was seen as a threat. A coup took place in Guatemala. The government was overthrown. A new regime came to power. The connection between fruit and politics became clear. Bananas were no longer just food. They were part of global strategy. Few supermarket shoppers realized this history. They saw only bright yellow shelves. They saw low prices. Back in Central America, landscapes had changed. Rivers were redirected. Forests had disappeared. Entire towns depended on harvest schedules. If ships stopped coming, jobs vanished quickly. The strange part was, an empire built on bananas had no crown, no official flag. Its power came from contracts, from trade routes, from supply chains, and yet it shaped the lives of millions. Farmers, dock workers, families. By the mid-20th century, the fruit was global. But beneath its smooth peel, a complicated story continued to grow. By the 1960s, bananas were everywhere. They filled school cafeterias. They sat in kitchen bowls across continents. The trade looked stable. Ships moved on schedule. Plantations operated without pause. But beneath this calm surface, pressure was building. Workers remembered past violence. Communities wanted change. In many plantation towns, poverty remained common. Wages were low. Housing was basic. Some labor groups reorganized quietly. They held meetings at night. They spoke about rights. At the same time, environmental concerns began to rise. Large areas of forest had disappeared. Wildlife habitats were shrinking. Plantations relied heavily on chemicals. Pesticides were sprayed from the air. Fields were treated again and again. Workers often stood below those plains. They had little protection. Few long-term studies existed. Few people knew how these chemicals would affect future generations. The focus was on production. Speed mattered most. Meanwhile, global demand continued to increase. Europe imported more bananas each year. Competition between companies intensified. New corporations entered the market. Old ones merged or rebranded. The industry reshaped itself. The United Fruit Company eventually changed its name. It became known as Chiquita Brands International. The fruit received a friendly new image. Colorful stickers appeared on each banana. Logos smiled back at consumers. Marketing softened the story. Bananas were advertised as healthy and cheerful. A perfect snack for children. A symbol of sunshine. But in producing countries, economic dependence remained. If prices fell, entire regions felt the shock. International trade policies added complexity. Tariffs and quotas shaped markets. Diplomatic tensions followed. In the 1990s, a trade conflict erupted. It involved the United States and the European Union. Bananas were at the center. The dispute became known as the Banana Wars. Governments argued over fair access. Small producers feared being excluded. The fruit once again influenced global politics, not through armies, but through trade rules. On plantations, however, daily routines continued. Workers cut heavy green bunches. Trucks rolled toward the ports. Another threat was emerging quietly. A new strain of Panama disease appeared. It was called Tropical Race 4. This fungus attacked Cavendish bananas, the very variety that had saved the industry before. The danger felt familiar. Scientists began urgent research. They tested resistant varieties. They studied soil and water. Because most export bananas were genetically identical, the risk was enormous. One disease could spread quickly. The strange part was, the fruit that built empires was biologically fragile. Its strength was also its weakness. Monoculture made management simple, but it removed natural protection. Diversity had been sacrificed. Farmers in some regions experimented with organic methods. They reduced chemicals. They focused on sustainability. Fair trade movements gained attention. Consumers began asking questions. Where did their bananas come from? Labels changed again. New certifications appeared. Promises of ethical sourcing were printed. Some companies improved working conditions. Others faced lawsuits and investigations. The industry faced scrutiny. In Colombia and Ecuador, bananas remained major exports. National economies relied on them. Entire port cities were built around shipments. Cranes lifted containers daily. Schedules were precise. Global supply chains became more advanced. Temperature sensors monitored cargo. Digital systems tracked routes. The empire had become modern, less visible, but deeply connected. And yet, the basic image remained the same. A curved yellow fruit, easy to peel. Children still placed them in backpacks. Athletes still ate them after games. The history remained hidden. Few people stopped to think about railroads, about coups, about labor strikes. But in producing regions, memories endured. Stories were passed down. Grandparents spoke of hard times. The fruit had shaped borders and governments. It had influenced foreign policy. It had changed landscapes. Now, the question was different. Could this empire survive new challenges? Or would history repeat itself? Climate change added uncertainty. Storms grew stronger. Rain patterns shifted. Banana plants are sensitive. Too much wind can destroy them. Too little rain can weaken them. Farmers adapted as best they could. They adjusted planting schedules. They reinforced fields. But global systems move slowly. Change requires coordination. Coordination requires trust. The fruit that once controlled governments now depended on international cooperation. A new kind of power balance emerged. Bananas were no longer symbols of conquest. They became symbols of interdependence. Every country played a role. Still, profits continued to flow. Corporations remained influential. Markets stayed competitive. What happened next would not involve muskets or ships. It would involve laboratories and policy meetings. The empire had evolved from colonial plantations to global networks. Yet the story was not finished. The fruit that built empires was preparing for another transformation. Today, a banana rests in a quiet kitchen. Morning light touches its smooth skin. It seems simple and harmless. But inside laboratories around the world, scientists examine tiny samples of its cells. They search for resistance. Tropical race 4 continues to spread in some regions. Fields in Asia have already been affected. Farmers watch their crops carefully. If the Cavendish fails completely, supermarket shelves could look different. The familiar shape might change. Few people knew that almost every export banana is genetically identical. They are clones, grown from cuttings, not seeds. This uniformity once made trade easier. Every banana looked the same. Every box met the same standard. But sameness brings vulnerability. A single disease can travel quickly. Borders cannot easily stop it. Researchers experiment with new varieties. Some are sweeter, some are stronger. Genetic modification is discussed carefully. Some support it. Others worry about consequences. The debate is calm but serious. Because millions of jobs depend on this fruit. Entire economies still rely on it. In rural Ecuador, families wake before sunrise. They prepare for another harvest day. In ports along the Caribbean coast, containers are stacked high. Schedules remain tight. In supermarkets in London and New York, customers compare prices. Few imagine the journey. The strange part was, the empire built by bananas never looked like an empire. There were no castles. Instead, there were contracts, shipping routes, trade agreements. In the past, corporations influenced governments directly. Today, influence is more complex. It flows through global markets. Consumers now ask questions. Was this fruit grown responsibly? Were workers treated fairly? Fair trade certifications hang in small print. Some shoppers choose carefully. Small decisions matter. Sustainability projects plant trees beside plantations. Water systems are improved. Training programs are offered. Change is slow, but it is visible. The industry is adapting. Still, history leaves lessons. Dependence on one crop is risky. Monoculture carry danger. Countries once called banana republics have worked to diversify their economies. Tourism, technology, and other exports grow. Yet bananas remain important. They continue to generate income. They connect nations. The fruit that once supported coups and conflicts now supports classrooms and hospitals. Its power has changed direction. What happened next surprised many historians. The empire did not collapse in a single moment. It slowly transformed. Instead of controlling governments, companies face global regulations. Transparency is demanded. Social media spreads news quickly. Hidden practices are harder to hide. Reputation matters. The banana still travels thousands of miles. But story now travels too. Awareness grows. In Southeast Asia, where wild bananas first grew, diverse local varieties still exist, small and full of seeds. These ancient plants remind scientists of something important. Diversity protects life. Uniformity can weaken it. The fruit that built empires began as a wild jungle plant. It never planned to rule anything. Humans shaped its destiny through trade, through ambition. Railroads were laid for it. Ships were built for it. Policies were written for it. Governments rose and fell around it. Landscapes changed because of it. Families depended on it. And yet, it remains soft. It bruises easily. It ripens quickly. Its fragility mirrors our systems. Strong on the outside, delicate within. The empire of bananas teaches a quiet lesson. Power does not always look powerful. Influence can be subtle. A simple fruit can shape economies. It can influence diplomacy. It can alter history. Today, when you peel a banana, you hold more than a snack. You hold a global story, a story of exploration, of labor and struggle, of innovation and risk. Few people pause to think about this journey. From jungle to plantation, from ship to shelf, the fruit that built empires now rests quietly in your hand. Its journey continues. Perhaps the next chapter will be about sustainability or scientific breakthroughs. Perhaps it will be about balance between profit and protection, between growth and responsibility. Empires once chased gold and spices. Few expected a fruit to join that list. But history is full of surprises. The banana story is not loud. It is steady, persistent. It reminds us that everyday objects often carry extraordinary histories, hidden in plain sight. And maybe next time you see one in a market, you will notice it differently, with quiet curiosity, because behind its bright yellow skin lies a story of ships, strikes, and science, a story still unfolding. If you enjoyed discovering the hidden history of this fruit, stay curious about the everyday things around you. There may be another empire waiting to be revealed.